Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2024 sequel, Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire. Now, if you follow my channel for any length of time, you will know that I'm a big Ghostbusters fan. I grew up watching the first two films on VHS. The first film is honestly one of my favorite films of all time, and I saw Afterlife in the theater. My first impression was good. Then I saw it again, and then I wasn't really as enthusiastic about it. With anything that you love, you can't fully throw it away. Yeah, for instance, I'm a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, and all they have done for most of my life is disappoint me and cause me pain, but I still can't let them go. So it's the same kind of thing with Ghostbusters, because that's what happens when you're a fan of something. And with Frozen Empire, the trailers surprised me. It looked like they were trying to do something different with a different villain, with the whole freezing of the city. It looked like they were trying to take a step into a more real Ghostbusters cartoon path for the franchise. And that intrigued me. Some of the scenes with the original crew, like the scene with Venkman talking to Garaka and saying, "Tall, dark, and horny at 12 o'clock," like, that brought back fond memories of the wisecracks that Venkman said in the first two films. And so the trailers for Frozen Empire started to kind of warm me over. So because of that, I decided to actually go and see the film. And I didn't have an IMAX showing near me. I just saw it in a regular theater. And what's interesting is I had kind of a similar experience with Frozen Empire as I did with Afterlife. Now, it wasn't entirely the same, because at the end of the day, I still don't mind Frozen Empire. I think it's a fun time waster. That's really how I sum up Frozen Empire. I think it could have been so much more, and I will detail why I feel that way later on in the video. But it is a similar sort of thing where after I saw this in the theater, it made me feel good. I was honestly smiling at the end, and I had a good time. But then when I thought about it some more, I started to realize and just see certain elements of it that just didn't fire on all cylinders, that just didn't provide the best proton stream, didn't quite trap the best possible storytelling. So as a result, it became a film that I didn't completely sour on, but it became a movie that I definitely wasn't as big of a fan of. And my issues with the film aren't with the director. I think Gil Kenan did a great job. I think he did a really good job directing this. This film has a lot of energy to it. It has a lot of the same visual style and flair that he brought to Monster House, some of the other animated projects that he did. And as a result, it leads to some really genuinely exciting and fun ghost-busting action when there is scenes of ghost busting. I also think the way that some of the specters were shot was cool and inventive, and really had a lot of movement. It was very fluid, and you could tell that he had a love for this franchise, and you could really feel it in every frame. Unlike what Paul Feig did with the 2016 reboot, where you didn't see an ounce of passion anywhere, here you could definitely see that this is from a guy who has his heart in the right place and genuinely loves this franchise and loves these characters. And in some ways, that did go a long way for me. And I love too that he did try to have a fair amount of scenes with practical effects. Yeah, there are some moments of CGI because that was just kind of unavoidable, but there's a lot of moments that were surprisingly done practically. And yeah, from a directorial standpoint, it's a well shot film. There's even some genuinely tense scenes, like the sequence with Lucky in the new Ecto Research Center when the power grid is down. Like that was a genuinely suspenseful scene. It was really well shot and really well done by Gil Kenan. Even some of the scenes uh, involving the Busters or involving Ray and Phoebe trying to investigate what's going on. Uh, those scenes were well done. The finale, which was the siege on the firehouse, that was also shot very well. There's some really grand, big scale scenes, like the beach sequence and just the sequences that involve the city of New York just getting completely frozen over. So yeah, it's a well shot film. It's definitely got some good directing in it. I don't think Gil is getting enough credit for that. I really don't. Now he also wrote the film along with Jason Reitman, and the script for the film is really where a lot of this film's faults lie. The idea of taking a more real Ghostbusters inspired approach to the story, I think, is a good idea. I think it's something that the franchise should have done with Afterlife. I get why Afterlife was made. I get why they did it the way that they did, so then you could have a launching off point with this film that didn't have to establish all these other characters, but you could have done that and still not been so overly reliant upon nostalgia. You still could have not done Egon's ghost and overdone it as much. Like you could have been more subtle with it. You could have had a different villain than Gozer. You could have done all of that. You didn't have to just retread and go over the same steps as the first film. So I don't buy that excuse. I really don't, because Afterlife could have done that too. And then you could have had another film with a different villain. But instead, they did Gozer again. And now with this one, we have a new villain in Garaka. And I think the script did a good job in terms of developing Garaka and the Garaka's lore and why Garaka is trapped in this orb and what Garaka's powers are, but then it drops the ball by the end, which is disappointing. Because once Garaka is unleashed, they did such a good job making him appear like he's this significant threat. He's got this death touch. He's got all these other abilities. And then you don't really see a lot of that properly showcased in the film itself. And Garaka, by the end of the movie, just comes across like a forgettable villain who didn't really seem like he was that as much of a threat. It was just too easily dispatched and too easily taken care of. And I definitely have to say the writers really made a mistake there. They had a prime opportunity to have a different villain, to do something different with it. And then you have this villain in Garaka, and this gets defeated like way too easily, way too quickly. And to be honest, New York isn't frozen over for that long. Seems like it was frozen over for less time than Gotham City was frozen over in Batman and Robin. And yeah, other than like a few moments with Garaka, maybe freezing some guy or doing a few things, the way that that villain is written is a letdown. So that's an element of the script that isn't quite as up to par as it could have been. But I appreciate the thought process. I appreciate the attempt. Let's do something different. Let's do a villain of the week kind of thing, like the real Ghostbusters. I also like the fact that the original crew here, it seems like there's a better balance when it comes to them being in this film as well as the new cast. Compared to Afterlife, where they were kind of an afterthought and were barely even in the movie, here it seems like they're in the film more, even though characters like Venkman or Janine or even Winston don't necessarily do as much action wise. And Ray does more, but in the finale, he does as much as the original crew, which isn't much, other than band together to pull the lever at the end. But other than that, like, yeah, they don't do as much either, and I'll get to that later. Why I think that's a little bit troubling or kind of annoying to say the least. But it was still a better balance of these original Ghostbusters and the new Ghostbusters than Afterlife. It kind of reminded me a little bit of that Extreme Ghostbusters finale, which is what I was thinking that Afterlife was going to be anyway. So this was closer to what I thought Afterlife was going to be. And that's why I think it's better than Afterlife. But it's not significantly better than Afterlife because it has some of the same problems that Afterlife does. The ending, for one, not only is the villain just weak and doesn't feel like it's that much of a threat, they prop up Phoebe way too much as if she's the one that is the only person in the room capable of retooling the proton packs with brass to make it so they can actually work against Garaka. Because they tried using the proton packs and Garaka would just freeze the streams and they'd be useless. But she comes up with the idea to repurpose them with brass, and she's the only one that has the brass packs. And I'm like, why isn't this a collaborative thing? Why isn't this something where Phoebe would bring it up to Ray, and then Ray and everyone else in the team would collectively come up with the idea, just like in Ghostbusters 2, where they collectively came up with the idea to infuse the Statue of Liberty with positive energy and positive slime and use that to get into the museum at the end. Like, why couldn't you have something like that here with Frozen Empire? Why does it just have to be Phoebe showing up and just be like, oh, I have an idea and I'm smarter than everyone else and I'm the one that's going to come in by myself and go and shoot Garaka? Because all this build up with the original crew coming back and putting their packs on and getting the suits on yet again, only for them once again to get overpowered and just basically be useless. It's disappointing and it is frustrating. I don't know why this is a repetitive thing that happens with this particular series of Ghostbusters films. It's not needed. Just have them all band together and be strong together. Why do we have to do this thing where the original crew was frozen and is basically useless for the majority of the finale? Yes, they do provide a purpose and they do band together and they come up with the idea to reverse the containment unit to suck Garaka into it. So you have that already in the script. You can just expand that with them being together and being involved in the finale and all having brass packs. Also, another thing about the finale is just, it is a letdown because it's a good build-up, and then when you get to the finale, you're like, yeah, you have some promising stuff with the possessor ghost taking over a proton pack. You have some, or the Ecto-1. But even the ending of that is a letdown because Slimer just eats the possessor ghost when it possesses a pizza. And they're like, okay, the possessor ghost seemed like a formidable threat, and then it just gets dispatched way too easily. And then on top of that, where are all these other ghosts? Why is Garaka just showing up to the firehouse and just doing it by himself? Why is he going solo? And why don't they freeze the city earlier in the movie? Because if you look at the advertising, it seems like that was going to be the case. It was going to be frozen New York, and it's going to be the new team and the old team investigating and trying to figure out what happened and how to stop it or how to reverse it. And no, that's not what happens. New York is frozen for barely any time at all. And that could have been a good setup It's like the day after tomorrow, but meets Ghostbusters, and the Ghostbusters have to catch these ghosts that have been unleashed by Garaka. Like, why not have him break the containment unit earlier? And also, why is it a containment unit again? Why is it always a containment unit? Can we have another way that spirits are unleashed? Why does it have to be the containment unit in the firehouse yet again? Like, that's lazy. So, and I like the idea of a new containment unit. And that's the thing that makes this script frustrating, is because there's a lot of new ideas that I really liked. I like the idea of the new containment unit. I like the idea of the paranormal research center that's in that old zoo and Winston funding it and having this new type of Ghostbuster who's like a mechanic and an engineer. I like that idea. I like that character, Dr. Pinfield. I think that character has a lot of potential. And I wanted to see more of that character, but that character was barely used. And I like the idea of repurposing packs and using them in that way. I like the different tech that they come up with. I like how it looks like it's so well lived in. And that's a testament to the production designer and the art director. But I still like the concept of that. I like the idea of a machine that can take possessed objects and suck the ghosts out of them and trap them. I think that's a really cool idea. And I think there's a good direction to potentially take this franchise in now because of all these new ideas that have been brought into the fold. But what's frustrating is those aren't fully utilized, and you have all this other stuff that just, to me, just doesn't work nearly as well. I agree with a lot of other critics. There's too many characters. You do not need the Fire Master. The whole scene with the Fire Master showing up in the finale as a gag when he's sliding down the fire pole. It's not a fire pole, but you know what I mean. He's sliding down the pole, and it's all for comic relief. It just completely killed whatever tension that the scene was building. It was just a really badly handled scene, and I blame the writer for that. And the whole character was just badly handled to me. It wasn't really that likable of a character, and his whole Fire Master thing just felt like it was out of place with this franchise. It looked like something from he was literally a firebender from Avatar. I'm like, what is he doing here? You could have just had the Ghostbusters team up and think of something, use the brass in the packs, utilize the ghost containment unit as a giant trap to trap Garaka. That's all you needed. You didn't need to have the Fire Master. You didn't need to have Patton Oswalt's character be the historian at the librarian and have access to all these old books and tell a story about Garaka. You could have had Ray do that. He has his own bookstore for that very reason. Just have a scene where he goes down into the lower level of the bookstore and says, this is the real library. You know, this is where the really rare books are. And it's not available to the public. Because it didn't make any sense that Ray would need an outside person to go to anyway. It just felt like that was just an excuse to get another somewhat well-known name in the cast, and it just isn't needed. It just takes away from the strength of the franchise, which is these characters that the audience and the fans have already grown to love. And on the topic of Ray, I will give the writers major kudos for handling his character so much better than in Afterlife. This seems like the real Ray. He's doing a YouTube video series with podcast where he's given supposedly possessed items, household items, and he's scanning them with a PKA meter and is telling us stories about them, and he's seeing if there's actually a ghost in there. Like, that is totally something that Ray would do. And you could just see the love and the compassion that Ray has for ghost busting in so many scenes in this film. And it was just really nice to see the old Ray again. And I will give the writers a lot of credit for doing that. Winston was handled well too. Even Venkman in the few scenes that he was in, he was a part of like one of the funniest scenes in the film to me. It was funnier than any scene in Afterlife, where he was questioning the fire master and was asking him whether all these absurd questions. And one of them was like, do you prefer your babies with skin on or skinless? You know, in terms of like whether or not he wants to eat the baby. Like I'm butchering the line, but the way that Bill said it was classic Venkman, and it was really funny. And of course, the tall, dark, and horny at 12 o'clock one liner. And I would have liked to have seen more of Venkman, but it still worked when it comes to the little bit that he was in the film, because it became more of Ray's movie at times. And I felt that made sense because Ray is the heart of the Ghostbusters. And that's why I wanted more scenes with them and less with Nadim and Hubert, and less stuff with Phoebe and Melody, her ghost girlfriend. Like, I don't understand why the writers did that. That was just rehashing elements of Afterlife. Complete to the point where there's a scene where Phoebe is playing chess alone and a spirit starts moving the pieces again. But it's not Egon this time. It's this ghost girl named Melody. And I'm like, why are we doing this again? Like, it just felt like the character of Phoebe was just put in reverse by the writers here. She's set up in a good way early on, where she is an integral part in catching this ghost in a genuinely exciting, fun scene. I will also give the writers this: the opening scene when Phoebe and the new team made up of Gary and Callie and Trevor are trying to catch this ghost in the middle of the city. It was a really exciting, fun sequence. But then Phoebe is sidelined because of all the damage that was caused by the new mayor, which is Dickless himself, Walter Peck. And I'm like, did we need Walter Peck? Did we need him back? Not really. Especially if he's just going to be the same character as he was in the original or in the first film. Like, why don't you have him be a changed man and then have that weird dynamic where he's learned from his mistakes and he's actually trying to help the Ghostbusters, and the new team doesn't really know why the old team is so skeptical of Peck, because they just see all the good things that he's done for the city. And then you have the old team are like, this guy has no dick. Like, why not have that kind of dynamic? That's a lot more interesting than just, hey, let's just have him be the same. He hasn't changed at all after all these years. And everything with the way that the writers handle Peck, it just exposes a repeated problem with this script, which is there are multiple moments where the story will just stop so it can just jingle some nostalgia in front of your face. And I'm like, I don't need that. I don't need to see the library ghost again do its boo scare to Ray. I don't need to see Slimer again, especially if all you're going to do with him is just literally do the same story from the deleted subplot in Ghostbusters 2, where Lewis is trying to catch Slimer, but instead it's Trevor trying to catch Slimer. It's the same thing. Slimer is still in the firehouse, and it's this other guy who's staying there who's trying to catch him. It's the same freaking thing. Like, you're not even doing anything different with that. And some of the stuff like the library lion coming to life, I didn't mind that, because it made sense in the context of what was happening in the script with the possessor ghost. So that didn't bother me. I thought that was kind of fun and kind of a cool little subtle nod, unlike some of the other stuff where it was just way too obvious. And they even brought back stuff from Afterlife that I didn't need to see more of, like the mini Stay Puffs You didn't need to have them back. You didn't need to have them essentially be in an entire mid-credit scene either. Like, why bring them back? They don't serve any purpose other than to look cute again and find different ways to kill themselves. It's like, that's a gag that works once. Like, you do that over and over again, then it's no longer near as funny, and it's more twisted than anything else. It just becomes disturbing. You're like, okay, why are you continuing to torture these little Stay Puffs? Why are we doing this? And there's a lot of that where you're like, why are we doing this again? Like the stuff with Melody. It's the same thing as an Afterlife. But instead of Egon, it's a ghost girl. And it also made Phoebe come across as incredibly dumb, which is not good for this character. Because the whole thing that she winds up doing where she goes into the spirit transference chamber and gets her spirit sucked out because she wants to be closer to Melody, but then it was all a trick. And that's how Garaka is able to be unleashed, because he can only take control of ghosts, can't control humans. And I'm kind of like, well, can't he just have a ghost possess somebody and then control the ghost inside the human? Like, that's kind of like, really? That's the only thing that stops this ghost from being able to control humans? Like, you have to go through this overly complicated thing where you have to hope that this girl would be dumb enough to take her soul out of her body. Like, also, Garaka, what if that didn't work? Then what? Which is why I think the plan should have been with Melody, instead of her making this sympathetic figure who becomes close friends with Phoebe, and they kind of have maybe some sort of relationship with one another. Instead, it's all a trick. Instead, either Phoebe is evil and she's like an agent of Garaka, or Phoebe is Garaka. That would have been something interesting to have brought to the table when it comes to the story. And it would have been kind of unique and fresh and different. Where instead of you thinking, okay, they're just doing the same thing, but instead of it being Egon, it's this ghost girl. Why are we doing this again? It's all a setup. It's all a trick. It's all a manipulation. Like, I would have preferred that. Would have been a nice little twist. Instead of, oh, she gets her redemptive arc at the end and she helps save the day along with the rest of the Ghostbusters. But it doesn't really feel like it's that earned, considering her involvement in what happened. And speaking of Afterlife, a lot of the characters, the new Ghostbusters that were introduced in that film, you felt like, okay, this was going to be a jumping off point for them. This is going to be a point where they are really going to take some serious paths in their development. They are going to grow as characters. And for the most part, they don't. They really don't. Phoebe kind of grows a little bit by the end of the movie. And you could maybe argue that Gary does, because now he gets to live his dream as a Ghostbuster. But why is Callie there as a Ghostbuster? I don't necessarily have a problem with her being a Ghostbuster, but the reasoning behind her just being a Ghostbuster full time is very weak. Also, why not have her be involved more in the end? Like, maybe have a scene where she's the one that helps Phoebe. There's something happening in the firehouse, and maybe this is where Melody reveals her true colors, and Callie comes in and saves Phoebe. So then you give Callie something to do other than just be kind of a disapproving parent. Like, it just felt like the writers didn't really think things through that much with her character. She's just there to just awkwardly react to Paul Rudd's bad jokes. And then Trevor was totally wasted. Like, even the Slimer subplot was useless because he never caught Slimer. So he never caught Slimer. It didn't even seem like he really developed that much of a connection with Slimer either. So it was just one of those things that was like, huh? Okay. Why is he here? What is his purpose again? Podcast is another one that's pretty useless here. Lucky doesn't do a whole lot either. Like, what, it just felt like the new Ghostbusters, the way that they were written, it didn't even feel like they needed to even be there other than maybe Phoebe. So the writers did a bad job making them feel like they should continue on as Ghostbusters, let alone be the new generation. And I had my doubts about that after Afterlife, and this is just solidifying it. I don't think this new team could carry this franchise. I don't think they can carry it if the old team is not involved. So that's why, if this winds up being the last Ghostbusters film that gets released in theaters, I'm not going to be too upset by that, because I think it already has reached its shelf life at this point. I don't think there's really anywhere else you can go unless you significantly improve these other characters. So as it is, there's not enough there for them to carry the series. And no, Patton Oswalt and Kumail Nanjiani's characters aren't strong enough either. I don't understand the reviews I've seen where they're like, well, I wish it was just them and the original team trying to stop Garaka. And I'm like, that doesn't sound good either. Like, at least I kind of like Phoebe. Lucky is a little bit better here than she was in Afterlife, but Trevor, who I didn't mind in Afterlife, just has nothing to do. And Podcast is still as useless as ever. His best usage is as a co-host for Ray's YouTube series. That's not good. That's not good at all. So, and even like Janine, like, yeah, she's got a pack and she's got what looks like a cool new gauntlet thing, but she doesn't do anything with it. At least not anything that I remember. So yeah, it's a film that the script, it's not entirely a train wreck. It's not entirely as awful of a script, or honestly as a film as some of these critics have made it out to be. But it's still not great, and it doesn't live up to its full potential. And it feels like it's just trapped by old ghosts. You know, like old specters of the past and nostalgia, and is not able to really fully move forward because of that. I think they should have approached J. Michael Straczynski from the Real Ghostbusters. He mentioned that he was surprised that this film was inspired by the Real Ghostbusters because he never was ever asked by anyone involved with the movie to contribute to it. Even Maurice LaMarche, who voiced Egon, he was disappointed that he wasn't asked to maybe do a cameo as a little love letter to fans of the Real Ghostbusters. I think that's something that they should have done. And I know that some of the issues with the script are because of the fact that this film was in development and was being worked on in the middle of the writer's strike. So because of the writer's strike, they weren't able to do a lot of on-the-fly improv. They weren't able to do a lot of stuff involving the script in terms of tweaking some things. And that's why I would have liked to have seen what this final film would have been like if there was no writer's strike. But the writer's strike exists. So this is what you have, which is an inconsistent script that has some serious highs that I think are being underrated and undervalued by a lot of people when it comes to this film's critical reputation. But it also has some serious lows. But because of the fact that it has its heart in the right place this time around, it's not trying to be manipulative, hey, remember Harold Ramis type of thing, like Afterlife was. It's trying to be more of its own film, and it's more lighthearted. It's trying to be more of a comedy. It doesn't really work that well as a comedy most of the time because there's a lot of lines that fall very flat and didn't make me laugh at all, especially stuff with Paul Rudd. But at least it's trying to be more in that vein, which is closer to what the spirit of the franchise is, if you ask me. But despite all of that, despite all of these attempts to try to inject some new life into the series and create a new door for the franchise to go into, or um, for fans to look forward to in the future, I can't help but feel like this could be like the last hurrah. Like this wasn't necessarily intended to be, but it feels like it could be. It could be the last time, you know, you hear those sirens, you see the proton streams, you see all of this on the big screen. And if the last time is the original cast, what's left of them banding together along with the new cast to save the world one last time, things could end a lot worse. Things could be a lot more devastating than what you have here. It's kind of bittersweet when I think about it, because I see so much potential with this script and so much potential with the directions that they could have gone in, but instead they play it safe, or they just don't see the potential that's right in front of them. They just decide to keep on going with the same tired story beats from Afterlife or from other films. And it's one of those things where I'm not mad at this script, not by any means, but I am disappointed. I'm disappointed by the script because there was just so much here that they could have done, and they could have just done so much more. And what you get is just a little bit. It's like you get a Twinkie, but you only get like 3/4 of the Twinkie. Like, you don't get a full Twinkie here. You just got like 3/4 of it. It's like not even half a Twinkie. It's like 3/4, because it just doesn't give you everything. It doesn't give you all the ingredients. Now, the cast, I mean, I'm not going to be too hard on them because the script really didn't give a lot of them to work with, especially Carrie Coon or Finn Wolfhard. Script didn't give them really much scenes, let alone much of an arc. Mckenna Grace, once again, is really good, even though I wasn't as big on her character arc in this. It was still a good performance. I still liked her role in the series. I just think they should dial it back a little bit on her being Miss Know-It-All. Like, dial it back a little. It seemed like that was kind of where they were going with it. Like, you don't know everything, you're still a kid, but then she's coming in and saving the day with the brass pack. And it was like, you could have not done that. Make her character grow a little bit more. But instead you had to put her on her pedestal, which wasn't needed. But Mckenna Grace, still a good performance. Paul Rudd as Gary. I like Paul Rudd, but I don't like him in these movies. It's just something about his character, the way that he's written. It's like he thinks he's cool and it's not earned, or he thinks he's really funny and he never says anything that's really that funny. So he just comes across as more annoying and kind of unlikable to me. And I like Paul Rudd, but I just don't like him as a Ghostbuster or this character that he's playing. And like, why is there so much of a focus on him? And why are we doing the family drama again? That's another thing. Like, they repeated that again, but this time it's with Phoebe and her parents. It's like, why did we have to do that again? We already did the family drama in Afterlife. But you also have Kumail Nanjiani as a newcomer. You could see that he's having some fun with it, but it just felt out of place. And I just felt like he was forcing a lot of his lines, forcing a lot of moments. I never thought he was that funny to begin with. It kind of shows here as well. Patton Oswalt's in the same boat. Oh, I get to be in a Ghostbusters movie, and I get to be all nerdy, and it just didn't do anything for me. Celeste O'Connor is lucky. I liked her in this. Wish she was in it more. Not utilized that well. Logan Kim utilized even less as podcast. Alyn Lind as Melody, fine for what they were trying to ask the actress to do. I felt she had some good chemistry with with McKenna when it comes to the scenes between the two, but I feel the character was not written that well. So yeah, it's a lot of this is where the performances aren't necessarily bad. It's just they're not given the best script to work with. So they're doing the best they can with what little they have. Like James Acaster is Penfield, and the original crew. Bill Murray is Venkman. Ernie Hudson is Winston. Dan Aykroyd is Ray. I would say Dan Aykroyd is the one that, to me, I think he's the best performer in this. I think he delivers the best performance in the entire movie. So if you're a fan of Dan Aykroyd, it's worth a watch just to see him play Ray again, the way that you know and love Ray, and to see him play this role in a way that isn't Egon can go to hell. You know, it is nice to see that, I have to admit. Annie Potts, another sort of thing where, all right, I'm here. Do you have much for me to do other than, oh, I'm wearing a uniform now? But other than that, don't really give her a whole lot. William Atherton just plays the same guy, but he's older now. That's it. And he doesn't work for the EPA. He's the mayor of New York. So that's just my take on the cast. It's not a bad cast by any means. It's just the script isn't as good as it could be. So because you have so many cast members, you just don't have a lot of moments for them to fully shine. And then you have other aspects of the film, like the cinematography by Eric Steelberg, the editing by Nathan Orloff and Shane Reed. It's all serviceable. It's all decent enough for the kind of film that it is. The music by Dario Marinelli, a lot of it was just, hey, let's recycle bits and pieces from Elmer Bernstein's score, and maybe a little bit of other stuff here and there, but a lot of it's just very generic sounding. Music-wise, I missed the songs that you heard in the original film or in Ghostbusters 2. Like, where are the memorable soundtrack songs? Why is everything just a generic music score? Like, can we have, like, Magic? Can we have something like Flip City from Ghostbusters 2? Why do we have to always have, like, these generic scores and just recycle beats from the other films? And is it because the 2016 film was so bad and it had an original soundtrack and that failed so spectacularly they're not going to do that again for this franchise? Don't look at that film as a reason why you can't have new original songs. There's a lot of Ghostbusters fans who do a lot of, like, new retrowave songs and music. Like, you could have gotten them to do a new retrowave, new kind of song in the style of Magic or some of this other stuff for this film. And the movie's like 115 minutes and it's paced fine. There are some moments where it kind of slows down a little bit. But I never was really that bored by the movie like other audiences were. And the $100 million budget is definitely on the screen. This doesn't look like a low budget movie by any means. But like I said, it's just a time waster at best for me. Like, it's not a complete demilitarized zone. It's not a film that I want to shoot in the dick with a proton stream. It's not that kind of film for me. I had some fun with it. It was nice to see the original cast again. And it was nice to see Ray be Ray. And there were some new ideas and new concepts that were introduced here that I did like. But there was just a lot of the same old flaws and the same tired concepts and just issues that held Afterlife back that were still present here. So yeah, I would say if the trailer interests you and you're a big fan of Ghostbusters, give it a shot sometime. But if it's not something you're really that big on, I probably would not necessarily recommend, at the very least, seeing this in the theater. I would say wait till this hits streaming. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.